Yes, this is 300 Plus Academy, where all we do is exams tutoring, ensuring that you ace your next exam. Still on the beautiful subject of biology, looking at cytology. What we'll be focusing on right about now is on the variety of cells, or what we call cell types. Cell types, we'll be looking at forms in which cell exists, and as well organization of life. Now, talking about variety of cells or the various cell types that we have, cell types that we have, you need to understand that how a cell function depends on the structure, the shape, and the organelles present in that cell. So take for instance some cells, they have numerous number of mitochondria than the other. Then it means that those cells are in need of energy. They are in need of adenosine triphosphate, ATP. So such cell, we call them active cells. So you see, depending on the organelle present in the cell, depending on the shape, and depending on the structure of that cell, that is what determines the function that that cell will perform, or rather, that is what helps the cell to perform the function to which it is suited for. Looking at the first cell we'll be talking about, we're looking at absorptive cell. The thing about absorptive cells is the special feature that they have is what we call microvilli. What the microvilli does is that it increases the surface area so that more absorption can take place. As you can see on your screen, look at what the microvilli looks like. It's just like having towel with rough surface. Now, the rough surface simply means that it can absorb more. Now, there are various locations in the body where absorption is of importance. The first one is talking about the lining of the small intestine, that's the ducts and cavities of the lining of the ducts, such as the intestine, the lungs, the kidneys. These are places where absorption is of importance. So when you look at the cells in this region, they are cells usually with microvilli, as you can see what the microvilli looks like on your screen. If a cell is not performing the function of absorption, then there is no need for microvilli. But when a cell is performing the function of absorption and transportation of molecules, then you expect the presence of microvilli, and that is what we mean by saying certain structure must be present so that certain features can be performed with ease. In the case of absorptive cells, you're looking at the microvilli. Were it not for the microvilli of the cells lining the intestine, then absorption of digested food into the body fluid, into the capillaries, is going to be very difficult. It's going to take quite a lengthy time before that absorption is complete, and before that can be completed, most of the digested food, it means then would have passed into the large intestine. But for the presence of microvilli, as you can see on your screen, there is increased surface area for absorption of digested food via the microvilli. Same in the kidneys, talking about selective reabsorption. In the kidney tubules, certain materials, most times, have to be reabsorbed back into the body. Water needs to be conserved. That is only possible because the cells of the uriniferous tubules, the cells of the kidneys, are well suited to absorb. Why they are well suited to absorb is because of the presence of microvilli. So basically, cells with microvilli are very likely absorptive cells. The second one is secretory cells, or what we call glandular cell. As the name implies, secretory cells, it means to release, to produce and release chemicals. In this case, when you talk about secretory cells, let's take for example the salivary gland that we have in the oral cavity. They are meant to release saliva so that our oral cavity is constantly being moistened. Now, when you look at these cells are going to be very rich in Golgi apparatus, as in this case we need release of chemicals from the cells. And when you look at the function of the Golgi apparatus, it is about distribution. It is about release of chemicals from the cell. So when a cell is very rich in Golgi apparatus, very likely it is a secretory or a glandular cell. Take also the pancreas, which is a gland that releases the hormone insulin, which helps in converting excess glucose in the blood into glycogen for storage in the liver. The cells of the pancreas here, since they are releasing the chemical insulin, you expect them to be very rich in pancreas. So whenever you talk of secretory cells or glandular cells, you're talking about cells that have been modified to release materials or to release chemicals. So that's why I said here, organelles that aid their functionality, and that is the Golgi apparatus. Moving on, look at the next one is the nerve cells or neurons. They are about the largest cell in the animal body, and what they do is that they transmit information or impulses from one part of the body to the other. And why is it that they are so suited for transmission of impulses, electrical impulses? Why is it that they are suited for transmitting impulses? It is because of the shape or the structure of the nerve cells, as you can see on your screen. Slender fiber. The slender fiber means that now they can, conduct impulses very swiftly. And also the arm-like process, talking about the nerve endings, the dendrites. You see, those dendrites are highly irritable. That makes it such that a single touch on animals is enough. That's a slight touch on animals, that impulse is immediately carried, sent via the peripheral nervous system to the central nervous system. It is interpreted, and of course, responses also relayed or sent to the effectors. What are we saying here is very simple. Nerve cells, their function is to transmit information or impulses. Now, what makes them suited to be able to transmit this information or impulses? It is the slender fiber and the arm-like process, which is highly irritable and conductive. Next on the list are muscle cells, which are needed for movement of various parts of the body, and of course internal organs. Talking about the muscle cells, and muscle, of course, the cells forms the muscle fibers. They are often multinucleated, as they have numerous nucleus, and they are elongated. As you can see in that diagram, they are elongated, they have spindle shape. And what we basically need them for is movement. So since they have to participate actively, talking about movement here, they have a high energy requirement, and therefore they contain large numbers of mitochondria. So you can see, talking about the muscle cell, in that the kind of function the muscle cells needs to perform is movement here. It therefore contains the organelle mitochondrion richly. So that's what we're talking about, that the function that the cell will perform is dependent on the organelles that it contains. And talking about muscle, we have the voluntary muscles. That's under those muscles that are under the control of the will. We otherwise call them skeletal muscles, which are attached to the skeleton for various movements in the body. And of course, we have the smooth or involuntary muscles that are not under the control of the will. These ones line the digestive tract, they line the uterus, they line the bladder, they line the arteries. Muscles here are not under the control of the will. And that's just that about talking about muscle. You can see the shape on your screen, spindle shape. And the special thing about them is the fact that they require high energy and therefore contains large numbers of mitochondria. Fibroblasts is the next set of cells. As you can see on your screen, those are fibroblasts. These are cells that produce protein fibers that make up connective tissues that bind tissues and organs together. Next up are chondroblast and osteoblast. Chondroblast produce cartilage, and osteoblast produce bone respectively. And then we have blood cells. We have erythrocytes as red blood cells. You can see the shape on your screen. It is biconcave in shape. It is non-nucleated, so that it has a large surface area to volume ratio to accommodate the red pigment hemoglobin, which is for oxygen transport. Talking about the blood cells, you have the leukocyte. This is amoeboid in shape. It could change shape and move out of blood vessels to sites where they need to provide a body defense mechanism. Talking about your white blood cells, they produce antibodies, they produce antitoxins as against defending the body against infections. And also we have blood platelets, tiny fragments. They contain the enzyme thrombokines, which is responsible for initiation of blood clottings. Other variety of other cell types, you can see them displayed on your screen. We have fat cells. It is round. It contains it stores fat. You have the egg. It is round. You have it in the ovary. It is for reproduction. You have the sperm cell. It is needle-like or whip-like. You find it in the testes for reproduction. You have the phloem of plant. It is rectangular. You have it in the vascular bundle, and it is for translocation of food. You have the guard cells. It is bean-shaped. You have that in the epidermis of leaves, and it allows for gases to come in, others carbon dioxide to come in during photosynthesis, and oxygen to leave as byproduct. You have ciliated cells. Ciliated cells, that's cells with cilia on them, the lining of the nose, the trachea, so that they prevent germs and dust from entering into the airways, from entering into the lungs, just to mention a few. So that ends that on variety of cells. Next up, according to your UTME syllabus, is forms in which cell exists. The cells of living things exist in various forms. Some exist alone, some exist in groups, some exist, as part of living organisms, and if you were to isolate them, they will not be able to survive. So we want to quickly look at the forms in which cell exists. Some cells exist as a single and free living. When we say single and free living, it means a single cell here is capable of living alone and can perform all of the characteristics of living organisms. A very good example are the single cell or unicellular amoeba, paramecium, euglena, chlamydomonas. So in this case, they exist singly and are capable of surviving on their own. They are capable of living freely and performing characteristics that keeps them alive. Also, there are cells that arrange themselves, as you can see on your screen. There are cells that arrange themselves into colony of round mass. Talking about volvus, Eudorina, Pandorina. The cells here, they arrange themselves into colony. We call them colonial organisms. They form round mass joined by strands of protoplasm. That is, their protoplasm is linked together. Each of these cells are capable of actually living alone, though. If a cell is removed from the colony, that cell will use its flagella, for locomotion, will synthesize its food via photosynthesis, and of course will reproduce or replicate itself so that it forms another round mass, another colony. So that is talking about colonial organisms. The numerous cells just joins together via their protoplasm and form a round mass, and of course live. Also, there are cells that arrange themselves linearly. Each of the cells here as well are capable of living alone. Take for example the filament of Spirogyra exists as a filament. I said here the cells of Spirogyra arrange themselves into a filament, that's linear straight structure, even when each cell is capable of independent living. A single filament of Spirogyra contains about 12 cylindrical cells or more, but you need to understand that each cell there, they are capable of independent living, but still arranges themselves into linear structure to exist as a filament. Then we have those cells that are not capable of independent living. They live as part of living organism. They live in groups called tissue. When you talk about tissues, the tissues are a group of cells which are similar in shape and structure and working towards performing similar function. Take for example the epithelial cells that covers the skin. Take for example the xylem and the phloem vessels that make up the vascular bundles in plants, or the epidermal tissue, that's the epidermis in plants. If you remove each cell here and bring them to live alone, that's not possible. They cannot survive alone. It is the single and free living, the colonial organism, and the filamentous organism that are capable of independent living. When a cell exists as part of living organism, it means it exists in groups called tissue, and they are working in that group towards performing particular functions. Subsequently, when we talk about organization of life, we will talk more on tissue. Yeah, moving on to organization of life. I like us to know that life exists in an organized form. Everything talking about organisms is not just chaotic. Everything is organized. I said life exists in an organized form so as to be able to carry out efficiently the characteristics of living things. Organization of life is the existence of life from single cell. That is to say, when you talk about a single cell that makes up an organism, that single cell is first of all organized. That is what we call cellular organization. And now the cells are arranged into multicellular organisms with various complex forms, talking about systems that perform different functions, from digestion to transport system to respiratory system, just to name a few. So life exists in an organized form. First, the cell is organized into tissues, and then tissues are organized into what we call organs, and then organs are organized into what we call organ systems. And now systems make up the organism. It is systems, various systems functioning well, that makes me an organism. Without the system, then we are going to have problems in our hand. Imagine if the respiratory system is functioning, the transport system is functioning, but the respiratory system is not functioning, then there will be problems. So we basically talk of systems or organ system being organized, or being what makes the organism a living entity. Organisms are then organized into population. Population are then organized to community of various species. And of course, looking at the how organisms, the community interact with the non-living components of the environment, then we talk of ecosystem. But focus for now is going to be from cell to systems. Talking about cell, we've dealt very well with cell. Talking about tissues, tissues are a group of cells similar in structure, working towards performing a particular function. What this means is that cells of living things are organized into groups so that they work towards performing performing a particular function. When you look at, and a very good example is Hydra. Hydra is an example of an animal that is made up of tissues only, just group of cells working towards particular function. Take note of that. That is a jam question. When you look at the animal tissues, the group of cells in animals, they are basically grouped into four. You have the epithelial cell. The epithelial cells forms the skin and forms the lining of the tubes of the organs on the inside. That is talking about the epithelial cell. As you can see on your screen, when we say epithelial tissues, you are talking about group of cells that forms the skin and of course that lines the tubes and organs in the body. Secondly, we have the muscle tissue. As you can see on your screen, you're talking about muscles of the that are attached to bones. You're talking about skeletal muscles. You're talking about muscles of the intestinal walls, and you're talking about the cardiac muscle. That is the second group. Then connective tissue. When we say connective tissue, you are talking about bone. You're talking about the blood, and you're talking about loose connective tissue. Take for instance the blood. Talking about the red blood cells. Make sure that oxygen is distributed or carried around the body. In a nutshell, that in simple terms, that means that the red blood cells now connect the oxygen from the outside to various tissues in the body. So when you talk about connective tissue, as you can see on your screen, you're looking at the bone, you're looking at the blood, you're looking at the loose connective tissue, and lastly, you have the nerve tissue. So when you talk about tissues in humans, it is basically grouped into four. And lastly is the nerve tissues that is responsible for coordination. So those are the basic four tissues that we have. Now, group of tissues are organized into organs. Like I said, the organs are an organ is a collection of tissues. So take for example the heart. The heart is an organ, but the tissues that make up the heart are the cardiac muscle, the connective tissue, the epithelial tissue that lines the heart, and of course the nerve tissue, talking about the nerves that innervate the heart. So when you look at the heart as an organ, it is made up of tissue. It is a collection of tissue. And moving on from that, when you talk about systems, system means group of organs that function together to carry out a major activity in the body. Take for example the digestive system. The digestive system starts from the oral cavity, talking about the mouth, the esophagus or the gullet, to the stomach, to the liver, to the pancreas, to the intestine, to the large intestine, and then to the anus. So this group of organs makes up the digestive system. As you can see on your screen, that's about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, about 10 systems. You want to talk about the circulatory system. The circulatory system is about transport of cells, respiratory gases, and talking about chemical compound, transporting chemical compounds throughout the body. What are the components? What are the organs that make up the circulatory system? You're talking about the heart. You're talking about the blood vessels. You're talking about the lymph structures. You can see that on your screen, talking about the circulatory system, the heart, the arteries, the veins. When you talk about the digestive system, you're talking about the mouth, esophagus, intestine, liver, and pancreas. You can see that. When you talk about the endocrine system, the endocrine system talks about the chemical coordination of the body. You're talking about the pituitary gland, the adrenal gland, the thyroid gland, the thymus, and all of the other glands. As you can see on your screen, pituitary, thyroid and parathyroid gland, thymus gland, adrenal gland, the ovaries, and the testes. These are the endocrine system. What they do is that they coordinate and integrate the activities of the body via chemical. You look at the integumentary system. The integumentary system covers and protects the body. You are talking about the skin, you are talking about the hair, you're talking about the nails, you're talking about feathers and sweat glands. When you talk about the lymphatic system or the immune system, that's immunological defense system. These are vessels that transport extracellular fluid and fats to circulatory system. Lymph nodes and lymphatic organs provide defenses to microbial infection and cancer. Lymphatic and immune system basically talks about protecting the body. So what are the components? You are looking at the lymphatic vessels, the lymph nodes, the thymus, the tonsils, and the spleen. You can see that on your screen. Lymph nodes, spleen, lymphatic vessels, tonsils involved there, spleen involved there. That talks about body defense. When you talk about the muscular system talks about muscles that produces body movements. You're looking at the skeletal muscle, the cardiac muscle, and the smooth muscles of the body. That is what the muscular system is about. You can see that on your screen. Also talking about the nervous system, it receives stimulus and integrates the information into the central nervous system so that responses are effected and that directs the body. When you talk about the nervous system, you're looking at the nerves. You're looking at the sense organ like the tongue, like the eyes, like the skin to receive stimulus. You're looking at the brain and the spinal cord, which makes up the central nervous system. So that is the nervous system. You can see that on your screen. Moving on, you have reproductive system, testes for the male, ovaries for the female, and other associated structure. It is to carry out reproduction. You are talking about respiratory system. You're looking at the airways and the lungs. Talking about respiratory system, the airways and the lungs, so that it increases the surface area. Normally, humans, we have a very low surface area to volume ratio, but with the lung, that has been taken care of, and therefore oxygen can move from the outside to the lungs, and then from the lungs into the blood. That's talking about the respiratory system. You're talking about the lungs and the trachea in fish and other aquatic organisms. You are talking about the gills and the likes. The skeletal system protects the body and provides support and locomotion. When you talk about the skeletal system, you're talking about the bones, cartilage, and ligaments, as you can see on your screen. The skeletal system, the urinary system, or what we call the excretory system, is another one. Removes metabolic waste from the bloodstream. It filters the blood. Talking about the kidney, bladder, and associated ducts, as you can see that on your screen. So that is just about all of the systems that we have. But the important thing is this: cells are organized into tissues, tissues are organized into organs, and organs are organized into what we call systems or organ system. And that is how life is organized. Everything is not just scattered, everything is organized, talking about living things. And with that, we have come to the end of this lecture, talking about forms in which cells exist and organization of life. Don't forget, subscribe to this channel, because this is where you need to be to ace your exam. Share with your friend, and of course turn on the notification bell. Talking about cytology, I think the last thing now is about how substances move in and out of the cell, and that will be in the next lecture. Thank you. From myself and the team, is bye for now.